The fire was down to coals when she finally told me. I'd found her 3 days before out past the Yellowstone cutoff, sitting in the road beside a horse that had given out. No bags, one coat wrong for the weather. She'd looked up at me without fear, which was the first strange thing. Women alone on that road were afraid of men like me. I was 46 years old, used up from a decade of placer work, face like a piece of boot leather left in the sun. She looked at me the way you look at weather, something to reckon with, not something to run from. I asked her where she was headed. She said she didn't know yet. I gave her my spare horse and we rode together into Cassidy's Crossing, which wasn't much a store, a smithy, 2 saloons that were mostly just rooms with whiskey in them, a sheriff's office that was empty more often than not. The moment we walked in together, something changed in the street. I felt it before I saw it. People stopping. 2 men outside the farrier's going still. A woman pulling her child by the arm, quick, inside. I thought it was me. It usually was. But they were all looking at her. The sheriff came out while I was still tying off. Wexler, his name, was a man I'd had one neutral drink with 3 years prior. He didn't look neutral now. He told her to put her hands where he could see them. She did it slowly, like she'd done it before. He told her she was under arrest for the murders of a mining camp foreman and 2 company men outside of Laramie. She said, "My name is Clara Dunn, not Alma, Clara." He said it didn't matter what she called herself. They took her. I stood in the street with my 2 horses and watched it happen. I should have ridden on. I know that. There was a claim I'd been working up near Bozeman, and I'd already lost most of a week to a broken axle and a creek running too high to cross. I had no stake in a woman I'd met 3 days ago who might have killed 3 men. I went and got a drink instead. Then I went and got another one. Then I went and talked to the man behind the bar, who told me that Alma Dunn had come through Cassidy's Crossing 8 months ago with her husband, Ray Dunn, who was a claim jumper and a hired gun, and a man nobody'd mourned when he turned up dead in the same camp as those company men. Alma Dunn had disappeared after the shooting. Everybody figured she'd run. The woman in that cell had her face, he said. Same hair, same eyes. It was Alma Dunn, and if I thought otherwise, I was being played. I said, "Did you look at her hands?" He hadn't. I had 3 days riding together. She had the hands of a woman who'd been working laundry, I thought, or maybe a dressmaker's. There was a callus on her right index finger where a needle would sit. Alma Dunn, from what I'd heard, had spent her time in camp loading rifles and keeping her husband's ledger. Different calluses, different hands. It was a thin thing to hang a woman's life on. I went and sat outside the jail until Wexler came out and told me to go away. I told him about the hands. He told me lots of women sewed. I told him I'd ridden 3 days with her, and she didn't talk like a woman who'd spent years in a mining camp. He told me to go away again, and this time he put his hand on his gun when he said it. They were going to hold her until the circuit judge came, which was 6 weeks out. The charge was 3 counts of murder. In Wyoming Territory, in 1878, a woman with her face and her last name didn't have much runway between here and a rope. I can't tell you exactly why I stayed. I've tried to figure it over the years, and I don't have a clean answer. Part of it was the way she'd looked at me on that road, not afraid. Part of it was that I was 53 days from the nearest thing to a home I had, and a man can get used to riding alone right up until he can't stand it anymore, and something in me had decided I couldn't stand it anymore. And part of it, the part I couldn't say out loud for a long time, was that I believed her. Not because she'd given me a reason to, just because. I'm aware that's not logical. I'm aware that's how men get used. I believed her anyway. There was an encampment about 4 miles north of Crossing, a band that had been moving through the area seasonally for years. Their chief, a man called Sitting Hawk, not the famous one, a different man entirely, had traded with the store in town and was known to Wexler as reliable. He'd been at Laramie the winter of the shooting. I'd heard this from the barman as a footnote in the context of how bad that winter had been. I went north. He was a man around my age, maybe older, hard to say. He had a face that gave nothing away unless he was choosing to give something. I came in on foot with my hands open, which is the only way to come in. I told him what I was there for. I told him I had nothing to trade except that I was asking him straight, and I'd hear whatever he said straight back. He looked at me for a while. Then he told me what he'd seen. He'd been at that camp on business, a dispute over horses, the kind of thing that crossed between his people and the company men regularly back then. He'd seen the shooting. He'd seen Alma Dunn standing behind her husband when the men went down. He'd seen her run. He'd also seen, in the weeks before, the other sister, Clara, working as a laundress in Laramie, 20 miles from that camp. He knew they were two people because he'd seen them in the same place at a church gathering in September. Two women, one face. He'd thought it strange at the time. I asked him if he'd say so to a judge. He looked at me again, that same long look. He said that he had said it to Wexler 6 months ago, and Wexler had thanked him and done nothing. My gut went cold. I rode back to town in the dark. This is the part people want to know about. What happened with Wexler, the judge, all of it. I'll tell you. It was ugly and slow, and it cost me most of what I'd saved from 2 seasons of placer work, and there were 3 days in there where I genuinely didn't know which way it was going to fall. I'm not going to walk through all of it. The point is that Sitting Hawk came into town and said what he'd said in front of a judge, and Wexler turned the color of old dough when he realized I'd gone north and found him. The judge was a fair man. They weren't all fair men, but this one was, and he listened. Clara Dunn walked out of that jail on a Tuesday, late in the afternoon, the light going orange across the dust. She stood there a minute, just breathing it. I was leaning against the post across the street, and she looked over and found me and didn't look away. She walked over, she said, "Why?" I said I'd been asking myself that. She said, "I have nowhere to go. My sister is dead. Whatever she had, whatever she owed, people aren't going to forget my face." I said, "No, probably not." We stood there in the street for a while. The light moved. Somebody's horse stamped and blew across the way. She said, "Where are you headed?" I told her Bozeman, a claim I'd been working. It was a cabin, barely, dirt floor, 1 window, a stove that worked if you hit it right. I had a mule and 2 horses and 53 days of provisions that were now closer to 35. She said, "I can cook, I can work." I said that wasn't why I'd done it. She said, "I know, that's why I'm asking." We rode north in the morning. The first week she didn't say much, and neither did I. We worked the claim in a way I'd never worked it, together with a second set of hands, and it turned out she could swing a pan and read a creek, and she'd learned it somewhere, though she never said where. We found color by the end of that week. Not a lot. Enough. The fire was down to coals, I said. That's where I started, and that's where it comes back to. The 3rd week she told me about her sister, about growing up on the Missouri, about Alma, who'd always been the one who wanted the wrong things, who'd found Ray Dunn and thought he was a door when he was a trap. About the day the marshal had come to her town looking for Alma, and she'd watched him ride past and thought, that could have been me. About coming west to find her sister and finding instead a grave outside of Laramie with nothing to mark it but a stone someone had moved. She told me what it was like afterward, being her sister, moving through towns where people looked at her face and knew that name. She said I'd stopped fighting it, I'd almost let them have me. The coals ticked in the stove. The wind was down outside. I had my hands around a cup of coffee that had gone cold without me noticing. She said, "You didn't know me." I said that was true. She said, "You could have ridden on." I said, "I know." She was quiet for a while. Then she slid her hand across the table and put it over mine, and that was all, that was the whole of it, her hand on mine, the cold cup, the coals going gray, the dark outside the window that had gone from hostile to just dark. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I'd spent a long time in country where nobody was watching out for me, A man gets used to that, I said already. But that's not the same as not minding it. I found out that night that I'd minded it quite a lot. That was 11 years ago. The claim played out in 3 seasons, which is how claims go, and we moved on, took on a small ranch up near the Judith Basin, built it with our hands, ran cattle through years that were hard and years that were decent. Sitting Hawk's band came through twice, and we fed them, which felt like the smallest thing we could do for the man. She's asleep inside right now. The stove is burning low the same way it burned that night, and I'm out on the step with the last of the coffee because I still do that sometimes. Sit outside in the cold for no reason I can explain, the same way I sat outside that jail for no reason I could explain then. I believed her. That's all it was. And she knew it was pure, not interested, not calculated, and so she gave me something in return that she didn't have to give. A man doesn't always get that. Some men never do. The cold comes in off the basin and I can see my breath, and the sky has gone to a hard, clear dark with every star showing. Inside, a woman I would die for is asleep in a house I built with my hands. I drink the last of the cold coffee and I go in.